Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel and welcome to TechStrong TV for today, Tuesday, July 7th. Hope you're all weeks off to a great start. We're in the middle of the dog days, hot days of summer. I know for many of us we had a long weekend. Monday it was tough revving the engine back up for work Monday, whether you're working from home or in an office. I imagine most of you are working from home. But today's Tuesday, and it's time to get to work. We've got some really good interviews and news and entertainment for you today. I wanted to lead things off, though, with an announcement, and I teased it yesterday's show, and I want to make it for today. TechStrong TV is part of our Digital Anarchist video platform here at Media Ops. And Digital Anarchist is something I started actually with my friend John Willis. He's my partner on it. And we started this over a year ago now. And, the original concept for Digital Anarchist was sort of to be a Netflix for geeks, is the best way I can tell you, which would be we would have sort of a Netflix-like interface that allowed you to search by genre or category and then drill down into networks and shows and seasons and episodes, etc. And but to really that it wouldn't be just media ops content, that we'd put up anybody's content who wanted to go up there and make it truly a universal platform. So like everything else, though, Rome wasn't built in a day. We started Digital Anarchist, and originally we had just digitalanarchist.io, and then we started doing live Digital Anarchist interviews from all the conferences we attend, whether it was a DevOps conference or a cyber conference, cloud native, etc., any digital transformation. We would use Digital Anarchist Live to stream live from conferences. Obviously, with COVID, that went away pretty quickly, but we quickly pivoted, really within the first week, into TechStrong TV, which kind of took the place of Digital Anarchist Live. All the while, though, our plans for continuing to develop Digital Anarchist remain, though, and we've undertaken what for us is, a pretty massive effort to categorize. We have, I think, 1,400 or 1,500 plus videos on the Digital Anarchist platform right now. And there's still probably another 1,000 that are up on DevOps TV on YouTube, our YouTube channel, which we haven't transferred over because we felt if it was more than a year and a half or 2 years at most old, if it was older than that, we didn't want to move it over. Though at some point we may very well do that. Anyway, we indexed all 1,500 of these videos, cross-referenced by categories, by guests, and redid the entire interface for the website at digitalanarchist.com. And we're really happy to be launching it today. You want to call it version 2.0, you can. It represents more of the original vision that John Willis and I originally had for Digital Anarchist. A lot of work went into this. I think it's over 1,000 or close to 1,000 guests contained in the 1,500 some videos, and you could look up by guest and see all the different videos. And by the way, it is our Digital Anarchist videos, it's the TechStrong interviews, it's all of our virtual event sessions, it's many of the webinars we've done, it's the DevOps chat podcast, and more. So it really is what we think is a really great resource. Now, the website is now also, it's live today. We are also transitioning our mobile apps and our what we call OTT, over the top, which is your TV apps, right? Apple TV, Roku, Amazon. We are transitioning all of those to the Digital Anarchist brand as well, rather than DevOps.com, as we move squarely into Digital Anarchist being our video brand. So really, really excited. Our COO, Salim Padani, headlined the effort on this Digital Anarchist relaunch, or 2.0 launch. But he had a lot of help from all of the team here at Media Ops, including a big shout out to John Willis's two sons, William and Daniel Willis, who worked on this. My own sons as well. We had the whole kitty corpse here while school was out. We got some digital natives on it. I think you'll like the interface. Go check it out. It is available at digitalanarchist.com. And we think it's what's next. If you want to stay up on what's next in tech, subscribe to Digital Anarchist. There actually is no subscription like a Netflix or anything. It doesn't cost money, but there's a ton of great content there. We'll be adding more and more content, and also to any of you watching who are content producers, if you'd like to distribute your content via Digital Anarchist, happy to do so. Write to us at, actually you can write to me at alan@devops.com or alan@mediaops, that's ALAN at mediaops.com, and happy to talk to you about it. Anyway, really excited. Go check out digitalanarchist.com. This show, TechStrong TV, is obviously available on digitalanarchist.com as well as TechStrong TV or techstrong.tv. Anyway, let me tell you what we've got in store for today's show. First of all, I had a really good interview with Tobias Kunz. Tobias was the co-founder of the company that became Red Hat OpenShift. He's left there and started a new company called Glassnostic. And really for microservices and kind of agile IT and the new way of doing things, Tobias thinks this is a game changer. And it sounds pretty exciting. I'd like you to listen in on the interview and you can find out for yourself more about Glassnostic. Then I'm happy to, our next segment is with Matt Newfield, who's the CISO of Unisys. And the Unisys Security Index, their yearly report recently came out. And Matt gives us the lowdown on that. And as you might imagine, COVID-19 has had an impact there. But I'm also happy to announce, as part of the Digital Anarchist announcement, that we are going to be doing a every other week interview with Matt, and we'll be joined hopefully by some great guests. And it's going to be called CISO Talks with Matt, Matt Newfield, CISO of Unisys, as well as others. So stay tuned for that in the weeks and months ahead. I also should mention that we're doing another new show called DevOps Unbound, which is sponsored by our friends at Tricentis. And we'll have a particular concentration on continuous testing, acceleration, and stay tuned for that. It'll be available on TechStrong TV as well as Digital Anarchist. So a lot of exciting news going on. Anyway, after my interview with Matt, I'm happy to be joined by Steve Flanders from over at Splunk. The folks at Splunk are starting up a series of virtual events. Who isn't? And their first one, I believe it's July 22nd. We'll be running some promos for it as well here. But Steve gives us a preview of it. It's on DevOps, open source insights and innovations. It's good stuff. Check out the interview with Steve. Then we're going to go back into the archives. We have something coming out of TechStrong Con, which was about a month ago now. And it features really one of my favorite people who presented there, Kat Swittel. Kat's interview is transactions to relationships. It is a long one. It's about an hour long, but well worth the time. And if you've never seen Kat present, check it out. She does a great job. I'll be back after that with the news. Then, of course, over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has an interview today with Brian Rozak, CEO of Optiv. And then looks like we have an analyst corner with Mitch. Actually, Charlene will be doing a webinar preview of the week's webinars on Media Ops as well. We have an analyst corner with Mitch, and then I'll be back to wrap things up. Sounds like it's going to be a great Tuesday. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Hey, check out digitalanarchist.com, and we're going to be right back with our next guest. like everyone else in the industry, Splunk has transitioned from doing trade shows and events in person to virtual events. They have a series of virtual events kicking off. I think the first one is July 22nd. I caught up with Steve Flanders from Splunk to discuss this next virtual event, which is on DevOps and open source insights and innovations. And here's now my interview with Steve.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. I've got a new company to introduce to you, a new company for our community anyway, I'd like you to be aware of, and their founder. I want to introduce you first to Tobias Kunze. Tobias, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I don't want to mess up the name of the company, but it's Glasnost.
Glasnostic,
excuse me.
Glasnostic is the name, yeah.
And of course, glass refers to a transparency, if you will. And what a great name, what a great meaning for a company. But Tobias, let's hear a little bit. I'd like to give our people a little bit of a background, both on you and on Glasnostic.
Absolutely, yeah. So I was a PaaS guy, a platform as a service guy. In my previous company, I was a tech co-founder of the company that became Red Hat OpenShift.
Sure.
So fully focused on like how do we optimally support the development of applications, right? And then over time, very quickly learned that to make applications really successful, it's not so much the engineering side. How do I write it? What is the code, right? But how do you run it? Right. The best code is worth nothing if I can't control it. It's kind of a nature versus nurture debate, right? We think as developers that coding is 100% of the value,
right?
And it's actually not, right? It's used. The code needs to go to school, to the kindergarten. It has all these stages. It needs to be nurtured, and that's the operations side of it. And we at Glasnostic focus on the operational side.
Fair enough. Don't tell my developer friends that, they'll be crushed. But that being said, it's funny you bring it up. When I first got into DevOps 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago now, there was this kind of push and pull, tug of war about, was DevOps too dev focused? Are we focusing too much on developing the code, testing the code, right? And then deploying almost, like somehow that deploying was the end of time, right? That after deployment, back to testing and writing more code. Or was it too ops focused, right? We were too focused on that deployment and application performance management and, what was traditionally sort of the ops side of things, when really the thing about DevOps was supposed to be a joining of them and breaking down that wall between what was dev and what was ops. It was all DevOps, if you will. And we've made progress. I'm not going to deny, I think sitting here, we've made progress. But there's certainly one of the things I think we've learned, Tobias, is that on both sides of this equation, all around, there's so much more we could do better. Right? We could do development better, and God knows we could do ops better. One of the big trends we see is this term observability lately, right? And how much people are focusing on that. And this we call AI ops is this other new kind of thing it's not that new, it's already a year or two old. But the idea of using machine learning and some sort of AI principles to try to better have ops. Why don't you talk to us with Glasnostic? Where are you focusing in on the ops side of things?
Yeah, so I think the framework I like to use that makes things, I believe, very, very clear is if we think about the world of DevOps in two axes, right? There's the axis where I really care about my thread of execution. That is the happy path that I start coding, right? It starts very early when I start a project. I think in terms of functions, of happy paths. And then later that becomes the thread of execution across systems, right? So that's where I care about tracing. That's where I care about compound latencies for my specific requests. That's where I care about error status codes, right? These kind of things. It's all to serve my initial request. How is that being served, right? And that's the developer perspective. All the developer concerns are horizontal, x-axis concerns, right? Travels all the way left to right, and then ultimately comes back and I get the result from my request. That's why I did this whole thing, right? At the same time, and that's just a matter of scale and complexity, today, with everything requiring software, and software to be being hyper-connected, there isn't a standalone application anymore, right? We also need to make sure that everything works together. These hundreds of services we're running. Not talking about the 10-person San Francisco startup. They have one product, they have one application, but enterprises, organizations, larger organizations, right? Generations of integrations, generations of systems, right? Where you keep on building new value on top of existing value that you already have. So that's the y-axis. Or if you want to take the musical analogy, it's what's the single voice that's the instrumentalist is concerned about, right? And the conductor cares about the score, right? Totally different concerns. We take care, we are concerned about the score.
Excellent. And that's actually was a great analogy. They were both great analogies, to tell you the truth. The music one got it for me, but hey, that's me. So give us a little background on the company, though. Product is out. People are using it.
Yeah.
How is it offered? Is it a SaaS kind of thing, or is it something that just gets installed on your own stack?
We do both. We tend to run pilots with SaaS, with the SaaS version, and ultimately enterprise installations, I would say, near 100% on premises.
Right.
On-premise so. Meaning, in this case, not necessarily in their buildings, in their data center.
No, not in the server closet, but it's installed on their, right. As I said, it's installed on their stack. It's not being done from a, that traditional sort of SaaS, third-party view down in a multi-tenant environment. Let's call it that way. And then, as you mentioned, it doesn't work. It's not practical if you're a startup with one app and that's your app. It probably is a little overkill. What is the right scale where Glassnostic starts really kind of making sense for organizations?
We run pilots starting with like 25 endpoints. We prefer 50. There needs to be a certain amount of complexity to make sense. Again, if you only have like 3 people playing, you don't need a conductor, right?
Right. It's just 3 people playing.
It's 3 people playing. They can look at each other, right? And frankly, if it's a smaller set of applications, kind of like if you have one Git repo, there's no need for us, right? You own all the code. You want to trace through it. You're going to build this like you always built an application. Where things get dicey is you have 20 teams, 200 teams, right? Different business units, joint venture partners, like complexity at that level. And everybody, nothing is serialized, of course. You can't afford that. So everybody deploys independently. Now you have a landscape of services and applications, hyper-connected, continually evolving, changes, everywhere and all the time. There is no more architecture. I think the key insight that we need to get to as a community is that architecture is an atavism. Architecture is the last waterfall thing we do, right? Once you think about it. We live under the illusion that there's certain decisions that are too expensive to change later on, which makes 0 sense in a world where everything's changing, just by the nature of complexity and scale that we're running at now, right? So architecture has become this leftover waterfall thing that I'm doing under complete uncertainty. I don't know how things will look like in production next week, right? So why do I spend all this time expensively making plans and decisions that I know will be immaterial once it's running? We take that, all the decisions you're taking up front, and replace that with runtime control. Because if you had, once you deploy things, if you had runtime control, you don't need staging, right? You don't have to do extensive systemic testing, which is very unlikely to be successful these days anyways. Yeah. You just deploy something, you put a quarantine around it, whatever control primitive you want to use, and slowly release this into the sea, right? Once you have runtime control, the majority of deployment risks are mitigated. Right? Yeah. You can work entirely differently. The IT ops roadblock just disintegrates. You can just take it on. Today, I'm running a cloud chaos, right? I'm running way too many services. I don't know what to do about them. The next development team comes on. Hey, can you please deploy this? I say, no. I need to test you first. By the way, there's a queue that's 6 months long, right? Just because I don't have control. Once it's released, there's nothing I can do, right? Except for like shutting the machine down. Right? Sure. But then everybody yells at you.
And well, that's like saying if you want great security, just unplug from the internet. Let me know how that works for you. So interesting stuff here, and it's what's real. I almost, I'm compelled to have to ask you, because we ask most people who come on, how have recent events with COVID and so forth affected business? What are you seeing short term? What do you think we'll see long term? A lot of people say, look, this, as terrible as it sounds, it's been a good thing for the cloud, because it's showing people they got to move. They got, they need to update. They need to be adopting microservices, DevOps, cloud native, cloud. I'm wondering what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely what you say. It's been ultimately good for the industry. Good in the sense, like if you had an old TV that kind of doesn't work anymore, and then you hit it to shake it up, and all of a sudden it works again, right? So a lot of disruption going on, in particular in cloud. A lot of workloads moved around from on-premise to managed service providers to cloud providers. Ultimately, I think Natya Sadel said it, right? We squeezed 2 years worth of digital transformation into 2 months. And yeah, that feeling has become reality to every executive out there now. So the question is no longer, how do we do digital transformation and what is it, right? It used to be a very abstract concept. It's very real now. Now the question is, how can we keep up the momentum? So that plays exactly into what we are doing. And we've seen heightened interest in the past 6 weeks now. To how can I kind of control what I do right now, but how am I going to do this in 3 months, right? I know it's going to be 5 times as many that many movies. Look, we had this at our own team here in Media Ops, right? I've tried to explain to people that, like in running, and I was never a runner, as you can tell from my body shape, but there are sprinters and there are long distance runners. A sprinter cannot keep up that pace forever, right? And that's where the long distance runners come in, who can do that marathon at a whatever, an 8-minute mile clip or whatever, a great marathoner does. And I think that you touched on it here. That's going to be an issue here, is we can't, and no pun intended with Scrum and sprints and Agile and all that stuff, but we can't keep sprinting at a long distance race, right? At some point, you need to transition to a sustainable pace, to a sustainable cadence, and with sustainable processes and things like what you're talking about and what you're doing there. I
I think that's going to be, there was this, and I don't want to say a crisis, but there was this sort of inflection point that you said or not, you didn't actually say it, you quoted someone, Matthew. 2 years of transformation squeezed into 2 months, and that happened. It's like forcing it through the eye of a needle. We were able to force that through. I think we're going to come to another reckoning of, okay, how do we sustain? How do we normalize it? It's going to be an interesting time.
Exactly. It is a massive operational crisis. It's not a development crisis. It's not a technological crisis, right? We have all the bits and pieces. It's how do I make sure everything works together all the time while it is changing all the time? Yeah. And ops is becoming more and more like air traffic control, right? Yeah. Where we just making sure the airspace works, right?
There's plenty of airspace, right?
Yeah. If you think back at the beginning of COVID here in the US, right? When Robinhood went down for 3 days, or like a day and over 3 days, several times in addition, because reportedly their DNS services got overloaded. They had zero ability to push back, to exert classic back pressure against their thundering herd. Right? Yeah. So how can you deploy something? We all run finite pieces that we stitch together and try to be oblivious about what the limitations are. And now at scale in production, these limits are being hit all the time. It becomes very unpredictable. It's a multi-body physics system, right? It's highly nonlinear. Something that is a request limit over there becomes a CPU limit there, becomes a latency issue there, becomes a thundering herd there, and so forth, right? Monitoring is not helping at all. Monitoring is a local technology, right? Where you see, okay, how many sockets are in close await on that host, right? What's the garbage collection here, the heap size there? Totally immaterial for the questions at hand, right? If we want to really direct traffic, how do we keep the entire digital landscape stable? We need to have these operational patterns in place.
Yeah. Because the other thing to remember is they don't exist in, no pun intended, they don't exist in silos. They don't exist in their own private vacuum tube or something. They're all interdependent. So when it's domino theory, right? When one messes up, it gets messy across and there's repercussions through the whole system. And so it becomes very hard to isolate and just minimize, right, what the issue here without it really, polluting. Anyway, Tobias, we're about out of time. You know what I realized we didn't mention? For people who want more information, what's the website?
Glasnostic.com. GLASNOSTIC. Like glasnost and perestroika.
Right.
USSR.
Yep.
Transparency, glasnostic.com.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for introducing the company. We'd like to hear more. Maybe we have you back on in a couple of weeks. We'll continue the conversation. Good?
Anytime.
All right.
Sounds great. Thanks,
Thank you. Nice speaking to you. Tobias Kunze, CEO, founder of Glasnostics here on TechStrong. I forgot where we were for a second. TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Next interview is with the CISO of Unisys, Matt Newfield. It's regarding the annual Unisys Security Index report, which recently came out. Matt's going to give us some really great insights into it. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, Matt will also be joining us for something called CISO Talks every other week. And I look forward to having some really great guests on that. If your company has a CISO who would like to appear on CISO Talks with Matt Newfield and I, write me at Alan, A-L-A-N, at MediaOps.com, and we'll talk about having you as a guest. But for now, let's go to my interview with Matt Newfield, CISO at Unisys, on the Unisys Security Index.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Our next segment here on TechStrong TV features Matthew Newfield. Matthew is the CISO, or CISO as some pronounce it. I've always said CISO, tomato. Anyway, Matthew is the CISO at Unisys. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Alan, for having me today.
Oh, my pleasure. So Matthew, are you from the CISO or CISO school of thought?
I'm the CISO school, but you are correct. I hear both.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in security for about 20 years, and the last one I co-founded was called Still Secure. I left there, and I started something called the CISO Group, which was kind of like CISO in a box, if you will. And I got so used to hearing people go back and forth that I found myself, I go both ways on it, right? Sometimes I say CISO, sometimes I say CISO. But it is what it is. Anyway, you know what? Before we jump in, I know Unisys recently came out with some interesting news and analysis, but I always want to share with our audience, right? We have about half of our audience are cyber folks, half are more on the dev, cloud native side, or DevOps. People want to know, how does one become a CISO, right? What's kind of what was your career path, Matthew, to becoming CISO at Unisys here?
Alan, I love that question. So I always tell people that what you did early on in life really doesn't matter for this role. I actually have a psychology degree, and I started my career in restaurants. I used to be a general manager for a restaurant. But when I decided to get into technology and had the dream of becoming a chief information security officer, I focused on working my way through every area of a CISO's responsibility, from being a red team, from being purple team, to administration, design. I worked help desk for quite a while so that I had a better understanding of all the components. And then I started working my way back up through management until I was given the opportunity to be a chief information security officer for Unisys.
Absolutely. Beautiful. I think one of the other things, Matt, that people need to understand that, first of all, for a long time, from organization to organization to organization, the role of a CISO was different, right? In some organization, it was very much a technical, hands-on position where you were really rolling up your sleeves and working, on security tools with the security team. In other organizations, the CISO really served as sort of a nexus translation point to take the security bits and bytes talk and translate it into business talk. Right, whether that was to the CIO or to the executive team or the board level or the CFO and risk management and those folks, right? You were the universal not you personally, but the CISO role was the universal translator, if you will, of security and business. And we've seen all of these roles now finally solidify a little bit, I think, anyway, and people understand. They don't look at like you have two heads when you tell them that you're the chief information security officer anymore.
Yeah, the role really has changed over the past few years. I don't look at this role as the office of no, which is what this office used to be, right? I mean,
yep.
we are the enabler of business. So one of the things I stress very heavily in our organization and with my team is our job is to find risks. That's what we do. We look, discover, find, and expose risks to the appropriate business owners within the organization, and then we help provide guidance. That's the job. We're really the enablers of business securely. And
yes, we can.
Absolutely. Yes, we can securely.
Yes.
Or at least with a reduced risk profile. Or finally, the other area that I focus a lot on is at least if you're going to make the decision and there's a security risk, go in with eyes open. None of this, I told you so, or why didn't you tell me? It's just that open, honest conversation about what's really going on in the world.
Absolutely. All right, we've gotten that out of the way. That may be a reason. We may come back to that. We'll have you on another time, Matthew, because there's so much that you want to talk about with that kind of stuff that makes a lot of people are interested in. But you were kind enough to come on today regarding some recent findings by Unisys, and let's share that with our audience.
Sure. We just completed the 2020 Unisys Security Index, which is actually the longest running reoccurring snapshot of consumer security concerns that's conducted globally. We've been doing this since 2007. And what makes this year very interesting for us is the fact that we actually started this survey in the March-April timeframe when we started making the
right in the middle
of the pandemic, right as things were really hitting the news and all of the information about what COVID really was and how it was impacting the world was spreading, and you were starting to see a lot of the shutdowns that a lot of people are still experiencing. And we ran this in 15 different countries, both emerging countries as well as emerged countries, and we do that based on a bunch of factors. And the report is available on unisys.com. But one of the interesting things that we saw, first time since 2010, the concerns of the general populace around internet security has been at its lowest level, and a level we're not used to seeing, because we expect, with all the news about identity theft and ransomware and attacks, for the concern on the general consumer around the world to be pretty high. But it's actually very, very low.
It is. You know, I think I told you before we went on today, I just recorded episode 58 of TechStrong TV, which we started when COVID started. And I got to tell you, as I mentioned, I've been in security about 20 years, 22 years, something like that. As a human being, right, just as a human, one of the things that most disgusts me about this whole COVID situation is that the hackers, the bad guys, they never miss an opportunity to take advantage of a good crisis. And even with all the human suffering and death and what we see going on here with people losing livelihoods and homes and just every, a year for like biblical plague kind of year, right?
Yeah.
These people are out there, and we're seeing a pandemic. We're literally seeing a pandemic, not only of the biological virus, but of cyber attacks, whether it be ransomware, phishing. I mean, just one thing. It's disgusting as a human to say that these are fellow humans who are doing it.
Absolutely, and countries that are doing it.
And countries.
Yeah, and let's be honest, when people's minds are not focused on this, and for all the right reasons, let's be honest, what's going on in the world with the pandemic, what's going on in the world, what you see in the news, these are very important things for people to have to deal with. And you hit a really valid point. If I've got to decide whether or not I'm going to worry about internet security or livelihood, the health of my family, the health of my friends, can I go out and get groceries? Am I going to find a way to pay my mortgage or my rent? Of course it's going to fall to the bottom of the list, and we would expect that. But unfortunately, to your point, and I think this is something people really need to understand, that's the time that the adversaries really do come out, because for them, For a lot of them, this is business, and they will have a better opportunity to make more money when people's guards are down. I was talking to someone earlier in the day, and they said, well, give an example of, susceptibility here. Well, everybody's desperate for news. Everybody wants to know what's going on with COVID. Am I going to be able to go to a store, a restaurant? Are they going to open back up? So when emails start coming into your inbox and you're not paying attention, if the tagline or that headline is good enough, people are just blindly clicking. They're not saying, did that come from a news source? Did I sign up for this? And they randomly click. And the same is if you've been out of work and you get an email that says, we have a job for you. You could be in an emotional state or a mental state, not thinking clearly, and they hope that you will click those links. They hope you will download those attachments or provide credentials to them through adversarial means.
I got to tell you, when I'm done with this interview, we have our Friday afternoon. We're recording this on Friday afternoon. We have our Friday afternoon team meeting, and one of the things on my list that I have to go over with my team is started receiving this week emails addressed to people in our team, on our team, using our email format, but not realizing that people they don't use their full name, if you will, as email. And so they're using full names of our people's emails, and the emails purport to come from other folks on our team, right? And they're signed by by other folks on our team. And it's only when you click or hover over, the from email address in your email program that you see they're really some random Gmail account. And, they're spear phishing us. And so I need to, we're going to run through a quick little anti-phishing exercise in our team today. And the emails are just what you described, Matt. They're innocuous from, hey, Joe, it's Jim. You know me, Jim, who works with you every day. Hey, I need your help here. I didn't get a chance to send this out. Could you click on that? Sign, Jim Jones. And Joe's going to look at it and say, oh, Jim needs me to do him a solid. Boom. Without even thinking, right? And done. Right? Now you're done. It's a scary thing. Let me ask you a question. Let's bring it back, though, to the report.
Sure.
When you do the 2021 report, let's assume you're going to do one, right? Do you think a lot of, no pun intended, but a lot of what we see this year is going to be an anomaly, or is that the new normal?
I think we're at the new normal for quite a while. I mean, let's equate it to work from home. I get questioned a lot. Is the work from home stats that we're seeing today, is that an anomaly, or is that going to be a norm? And nobody can predict 10 years out, even 5 years out when it comes to these kinds of things. But for the next few years, I think what we're seeing is going to be a norm. For people who, for example, who have been unemployed for a period of time, just because you start work again doesn't mean you're made whole quickly. It takes quite a while for people to feel like they've been made whole. And I do believe for quite a while, we're going to see cybersecurity and cybersecurity concerns and incidents really low on the reporting schedule. And the other thing that causes me concern for next year and even the remainder of this year, a lot of the breaches that are occurring today will not make it to the news. Now, it's going to be a while before any of that information comes out to the public eye because there are too many other things to report on than to talk about what you and I are actually talking about, which is why this is so exciting to be able to have these conversations because, I don't want to downplay anything that's going on in the world or people's lives, but the point of all of this and the point of the conversations around the index is through all of it, please don't take your eye off the ball. Please just remember to do those basic things like you just said. Hover over the link. Take an extra 10 seconds and just look. If it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. right? If
Yeah.
if you're getting emails with information, you never signed up to get that information, there's something wrong here. And another point I think a lot of people, and when you're having your discussion that I think people need to get over is, and I hear this all the time, who am I? Nobody's attacking me. I don't have anything they want. And I think consumers and the general population need to understand that you're correct. Who am I? I'm not always just being attacked on a personal level. A lot of these attacks are very random, right? They're attacking IP addresses. They're buying very large lists of email address from the dark web and utilizing those. Very rarely are people attacking you specifically. Like a group is going, I'm going to do something to Alan today or to me today. They're looking at the larger scope because that's where they're going to get their return on investment. That's where their money is best spent, is you hit it as many people as possible. And if you get that mindset to realize that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't personal, it's not targeted, it's just because I happen to be using whatever email system, or I happen to work for a company that, you know, they were attacking that domain, that's where you're going to have your problems.
Yep. Matthew, we're almost out of time. I want to end things on a positive note if we can. So I'm going to share something, you know, from our own analysis and analytics here. So we run DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard. Just looking at traffic logs, since COVID, Security Boulevard is up 79%. And that's stripping out the bots, the bull crap. I'm talking real people, you know, real numbers. 79% since COVID. Almost 80% increase in traffic. Now, granted, our site doesn't aim at consumers much. It's probably more aimed at security pros. But the fact that people are concerned enough and they are trying to stay up to date on what, you know, things like the index from Unisys and other surveys that we've seen come out recently. Right, I think people do care. I think, as you mentioned, in the stack of human suffering and human, you know, humanity in general that we see right now, yes, cybersecurity is low down the list. But within the IT sphere, I think cybersecurity is right there. Right, people are understanding, man, this is real important. We got to stay with all the remote work and working from home and all that. We have got to stay on our game with this, and we're trying, right? And we're trying.
And I agree with that. One of the things that, you know, let's end on that high note. People like myself, we often get accused of being inflammatory, or, you know, the sky is falling, and a lot of us call that FUD. You know, instilling fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that's not our point. Our point is just to keep open, keep your eyes open, keep thinking. But to your point, start using some of these other resources. There are a lot of resources out there. We have some of them in our index. If people want to go take a look at that index and read through who to call, how to call, you know, those kinds of guidance, that's what the whole mission of this is to help make sure that as people are navigating through 2020, for this year, 2021 and beyond, that they have a roadmap, they have an understanding of what they should be looking at when it comes to cybersecurity, and to do our best to make that roadmap easy so, again, they can focus on those more important things, health, family, and the ability to generate revenue for them.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you for joining us. Come back and visit us again. We love hearing CISO perspectives anyway. So, and thanks for doing your work with the Unisys Index. It's a, you know, just again, especially as you go year to year to year, these kinds of things are so invaluable. So have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Alan. It was my honor to be here.
All righty. Matt Newfield, CISO at Unisys on the Unisys Index. Check it out. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Like everyone else in the industry, Splunk has transitioned from doing trade shows and events in person to virtual events. They have a series of virtual events kicking off. I think the first one is July 22nd. I caught up with Steve Flanders from Splunk to discuss this next virtual event, which is on DevOps and open source insights and innovations. And here's now my interview with Steve.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Steve Flanders of Splunk. Hey Steve, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, glad to be here.
My pleasure. So Steve, well, I think everyone in our audience knows Splunk and kind of what Splunk does and is and offers, but they probably don't know Steve Flanders. So why don't we start off with, who's Steve Flanders and what do you do at Splunk?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a director of engineering at Splunk. I'm responsible for our observability GDI, or Getting Data In initiative. Basically been in the observability or monitoring space for over the last decade. Previously was at Omnition that Splunk just recently acquired, which worked in distributed tracing and observability specific technologies. And then before that at VMware, working on log analytics and logging products.
Fantastic. And Steve, well, the reason we had invited you on is Splunk has recently announced a virtual event, as most events are today, right? A new virtual event coming up. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit?
Yeah. So this is going to be a DevOps and open source based virtual event, which is very cool. So the idea here is to basically talk about the technologies that are really starting to innovate and take over in terms of software development life cycles. So anything from CI/CD type stuff to observability tools, both instrumentation and data collection and the like.
Very cool. Steve, this whole term observability is one that's really been catching on lately. And I noticed it, I guess I noticed it a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. But why don't, and it kind of really does play into Splunk's kind of wheelhouse. But why don't you, for our audience, when we talk about observability, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so there are actually some pretty significant differences between traditional monitoring and observability. And really it comes down to, in a monitoring environment, you know what to look for and you just want to be alerted about it. Where observability, you're trying to ask questions of your system and trying to do problem isolation and root cause analysis. So it's the ability to really observe your system, be able to ask questions and gain insights from that data.
Love it. Excellent, Steve. Good. That was probably one of the best definitions I've heard on here. So thank you very much. So first of all, we should ask, when is this conference? When is the virtual conference?
So it's coming up the end of July, so very soon.
About a month from now. And is it just DevOps and observability, or what are we calling it?
Yeah. So it's a DevOps conference. So you can actually get more information on events.splunk.com. And it's a single day event. We're going to have both participants from Splunk as well as some partners. We have Shopify coming and a couple other Splunk partners. They're going to be presenting on a variety of different DevOps and open source technologies. There'll be 2 different tracks. So depending on what you're interested in, you can choose your track. You can mix and mingle if you want. But the idea here is really to deep dive into what these technologies are and how you can start getting value out of them.
Love it. Steve, all right. So I think we've laid that out. And just in case anybody missed it, they can get more information at events.splunk.com. Right? Okay. All right. Our next kind of area I want to jump in with you is, okay, sounds like you got some great partners who I assume will be speaking. Talk to us. What are some of the sessions or titles or speakers that kind of got you excited?
Yeah, so one of the big ones is about OpenTelemetry, which is a very exciting project. The idea here really is to provide an open source and open standards-based way to instrument and collect telemetry data from your applications, which you can then send to the back end of your choice, so it's a vendor agnostic solution, and really get rich insights out of it. So we actually have 2 different sessions on OpenTelemetry. One will be a little bit more hands-on, like how you can actually get up and running with it. And the other one will talk about the power you can get out of leveraging OpenTelemetry. We'll focus a lot on distributed tracing and what that means in microservices and distributed-based architectures. The latter session, the one on actually using distributed tracing, is the one that we'll be partnering with Shopify on. They're actually big users of OpenTelemetry and actually contributors to it of it as well. And so they'll actually share how they're leveraging in their environment and getting insights out of the data.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with OpenTelemetry. Good stuff. What else?
What else? So, I mean, really, there should be a little bit of everything, for a little bit of something for everyone. I mean, in regards to whether you care about CI/CD, which is a pretty big topic for developers nowadays. Like, you can't like ship things once a week. You want to really be doing it on a continuous basis. What open source tools are around there that can really help you? We already talked a little bit about the observability aspects. That's probably a huge area, especially one that Splunk participates very heavily in going forward. And then a few other open source projects as well. So it won't be all like CNCF, like Linkerd. We'll talk a little bit about service mesh. That's another
cool
technology that's starting to take off. So really, no matter what you're interested in regarding like building more cloud native or modern technology stacks, observing these systems and looking at open source solutions along the way, there's a little bit of something for everyone here.
Cool. Steve, I got to ask, because I've seen different conferences doing it differently recently. Is there a charge to attend?
No. So there'll be no charge to attend. There will actually be people available to answer questions throughout the session. So very interactive if you want. Some of them will be recorded as well, so it'll be easier to get access to this material after the fact. Really, the goal is just to invite everyone, like share everything that's going on in the industry as a whole, and really provide insights into how you get started, where you go next. One of the things that we see a lot of with open source technology is you might be able to start using it, but then how do you productionize it? How do you operationalize it? What happens when you get stuck? How do you get help? So we'll kind of drill into those different aspects as well.
Okay. And then beyond just speakers, like, standard sessions, are there any kind of learning or workshops? Is there any expo hall or anything like that?
Yeah. So the goal is to make it as interactive as possible. I did mention there's one on OpenTelemetry that'll be a workshop type event. Our goal is actually to publish a variety of different things. So even if the sessions themselves are about 30 minutes long, so you can't do too much in a workshop with that. But even after the fact, we'll actually post some workshop material that people can go reference. We've actually done this at a few other virtual conferences recently, so we can definitely provide links to those. More talks in this particular DevOps event. The idea is to provide insights into these open technologies, and then we can provide more of a hands-on later. Our goal is actually to do multiple of these events long term.
Excellent. And then do you you mentioned a bunch of the CNCF, Linkerd, and some of the service mesh kind of stuff. Are you going to have people from CNCF speaking there, or is it just more of users?
It'll be users and contributors, not necessarily CNCF specific. As I mentioned, like Shopify is an active contributor. We have someone from Linkerd, also a contributor. So people that either know the technology or work very closely with it. The idea is really to provide both an end user perspective, even from a maintainer perspective.
Yep. And then let's talk about, we do a fair amount of virtual events here ourselves, obviously, and everyone does a fair amount of virtual events. There's no physical events anymore. But let's talk about the user experience. Is this, like you mentioned, a lot of them, are they broadcast live and then you're recording some of them, or are they all recorded? Is it like on a Google Hangouts platform or a webinar? What's the story?
Yeah, so it'd be a webinar type. It's not webinar itself, the technology, but it's an open platform that people can join into with the 2 different category tracks. Some of them are recorded, but even when they're recorded, like the speakers that were involved will be there to answer questions as well. Some of them will happen live. So like, for example, the open telemetry one I mentioned is kind of like a keynote slot at the end of the event. So instead of there being 2 tracks, it'll be the only talk occurring. And at that time, it'll definitely be live and interactive, with the idea to be to have people kind of interject and provide their insights as well. There's pros and cons to both approaches. Like if you record in advance, like if you have any mistakes or typos, right, it's very easy to edit that stuff out. But at the same time, like if you want to interject, you have to kind of wait till the end. On the flip side, doing it live, right, any mistakes or issues can happen, but that's fine, right? That's the whole point of a conference.
It's live TV, man. As I said, we've done a bunch of them here, and in our conferences we also have both. I will tell you, look, there is a certain power or buzz or kind of pulse that you get from a live speaker speaking live, but you got to weigh that against the risk. The biggest risk, frankly, is the internet connectivity, right? Someone's zooming in or whatever they're using, and something happens to their internet and they're done, and that kind of stinks. The other thing I will tell you that I've come to really like is when you do a pre-recorded session and you have that speaker live while his or her session is playing, that you can, let's chat, but that who you can chat with while he's actually or she is actually speaking. You don't get, to me, that's something you can't do in an in-person event, right? You don't get to talk to the person while their presentation is playing or while their session is playing. You got to kind of wait in the end, and you might get one question because there's a queue. And I love that interactivity of it, right? So you really can get inside the head and thoughts of the presenter, while that presentation's going live. And that itself can also be preserved and recorded, right?
Yeah,
so it's a great experience.
You want to interact as much as possible, ask questions. Even if you don't get all your questions answered right away, right after the fact, we're definitely going to be available for follow-ups. The goal is to make it as interactive and as fun as possible. We know that people have short time, so if you have to watch the sessions afterwards, as mentioned, they're going to be recorded, so you'll have that ability as well. But really, live is the time to get Q&A taken care of.
Yeah, no doubt. Unless you like reading Q&A questions after the fact, but it doesn't do it for me, Steve. We didn't mention sponsors have exhibit booths there or anything like that, or no? Yes?
Yeah, so they'll definitely be sponsors with exhibit halls. The idea, again, make it interactive. People will be able to join on in, ask questions of the sponsors, see the technology that's available. It'll be just like any other virtual conference, but the focus here is really on open source and DevOps type activities. So if you're kind of curious of what's happening in that space, like more modern technology stacks, we're moving away from this dev versus ops mentality, and really having a single culture within a company of how you build these technologies. And then the push to open source, especially for instrumentation, data collection, CI/CD, service mesh type stuff. These are things that like SREs today are living and breathing, and staying ahead of it because it's changing so fast that's just so difficult. So we'll focus on that. The exhibit halls will be based on that as well. The goal is to make it as interactive and as fun and as engaging as possible. And definitely there'll be the ability to view all this material afterwards.
Forgive me, but I know you said the end of July, but is there an exact, what was the date? Do you know?
I believe it's the 24th.
Okay, I just want to make sure we put it out there for anyone watching this. They should go to events.splunk.com anyway to check it out. But I wasn't sure if we said the date, and I wanted to make sure we didn't leave that out. All right, Steve, it sounds like it's going to be a great event.
Yeah, definitely. And apologies, it's July 22nd. It's an all-day event, 8:30 to 3. It's on the 22nd, though.
8:30 to 3 East Coast time, West Coast time?
Yes, we have both times available, 8:30 to noon Pacific time, 11:30 to 3 Eastern time. So the idea is it takes about half your day, and it should be time zone friendly no matter which coast you're on.
I'm sorry to be so nitpicky, but I know people who watch the videos, so this is, everyone they say there's visual learners, there's oral learners, who have to listen, some have to see, some are tactile, they have to feel it. So I find when I'm reading, it's very easy for me to see these things and do them, or if I click a link. But when I'm watching it and listening on a video, it's like I got to get it drummed into my head. I apologize. It's just me. Anyway, Steve, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else we might have missed or you want to hit on?
I would just say, like, if you're not looking at these open technologies, if you're not following something like CNCF or looking at more microservices, distributed-based architectures, that's really where the future is. So even if you're not using these technologies yet, it would be very good to start like understanding where they fit, how you can get started with them, how they're evolving, and the problems that they're solving. So I really feel like no matter where you are in your cloud journey, whether you're more advanced user, fully microservices, already familiar with these technologies, or just brand new coming into this space, there really is going to be something for everyone at this virtual event. So we definitely encourage you to come take a look at it.
Absolutely. You know, if you're not using them yet or contemplating them using them yet, Steve, it might be too late. You better jump on this. I heard someone say the other day, we've seen 2 years of cloud transformation in the last 2 months, right? So companies that were planning on doing this thing over the next 2-3 years have had to really do it now, today, and get it done. So, it's a very timely subject, and companies, you really can't afford to wait at this point, right? I mean, time's of the essence. Anyway, hey man, events.splunk.com. It's a DevOps open source virtual event. A lot of great stuff going on there. Steve, thanks for letting us know about this. And come back and maybe we'll talk after the event, or maybe even before. We'll talk about some more of the sessions and stuff, okay?
That sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
All righty, Steve Flanders at Splunk here on TechStrong TV. Events.splunk.com. That's the URL to go to. And it's, I think, July 22nd, we said, right, Steve? All righty. This is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. For today's Something Old segment, again, pulling from our TechStrong Con conference, I went and grabbed Kat Switel's Digital Transactions to Relationships session. It is a little long. I'll tell you, I want to be upfront with you. It's about an hour long. But if you've never had the chance to watch Kat present, it's well worth your time and effort. I think you're going to enjoy it. So here from TechStrong Con is Kat Switel.
Hi, I'm Kat Switel, and today I'm going to talk to you about digital transformation and the shift from transactions to relationships. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? I think the first thing that we're probably all wondering is, what does digital transformation even actually mean, if it means anything anymore? It seems like everyone is just trying to sprinkle little digital transformation on just about everything, and it becomes a little bit difficult to discern the actual meaning of the phrase. So I'm going to give you my take on what digital transformation actually is and why it's desirable, and some of the potential pitfalls of digital transformation. So digital transformation, you don't just sprinkle it on everything. There's a time and a place for everything. We've all heard that before, right? I want to look specifically at the words time and place, because I think they are very important for the idea of digital transformation if we really want to understand what that is. So I'm going to take you to a place that I know quite well, my grandparents' saloon, which is in a little mining town. They've since sold it, but it was in a little mining town in the mountains of Arizona. And here's some photos. That's my grandfather and my grandmother, and that's their saloon. And this is how relationships used to happen, right? And this is how we're very accustomed to relationships happening, that they are restricted by physical proximity. So you have relationships with the people and businesses that are close to you in physical proximity, the places that you frequent, the people that you frequently encounter, and this is how we like to do business. So you have a tab at a local saloon or whatever the case may be, and the people that you encounter frequently know lots of things about you, and you know lots of things about them. The businesses that you encounter frequently, they know about you and you know about them. And this is all constrained by physical proximity, relationships constrained by physical proximity. And now, I think with digital transformation, we're seeing that constraint broken. So now I have a relationship with my grocery store. I get coupons recommended to me for things that I buy frequently. I get rewards based on the things that I buy frequently, or I get incentives to stop into the store when I haven't been in for a while. I have the app on my phone. When I check out, they know by my phone number what my name is, even if I've never met the checker before, right? And same thing with Amazon. You get recommendations for you. It tries to show you the most relevant search results first, because you have this relationship with these companies, and they're not constrained by physical space at all, right? So I don't have to have an Amazon store in my community. I have this relationship with Amazon, and it's actually weird relationship that is across all these different faucets, and it's not at all constrained by physical proximity. So we have technology, business models that are enabling these relationships that are not constrained by physical proximity. And I think that really goes to the core of digital transformation. So there's a time and a place for everything, and what we're doing with digital transformation is we are transforming that place where relationships take place. So we have relationships not constrained by physical proximity. Right? We've actually already done the same thing with time, and that was with the advent of the clock time, because time used to be a function of place. So the time of year and whatever climate you're in has a great bearing on your life and the activities that you engage in. You still have these holdovers from that time when time and place are really tightly linked, right? We have celebrations and holidays that are linked to a specific time in a specific place. But then we get the clock time, and that separates time and place. So now we can think of time and have ideas about time that have nothing to do with place at all. For example, a conference online it doesn't have anything to do with place, right? We all just show up at a specific clock time, and we don't need to be physically located together in order to exchange ideas in the way that we are doing. So now, through technology-enabled business models and technology tools that have become integrated in our society, we now have been able to separate relationships from physical place. So we have this socially constructed space enabled through technology that is separate from our physical space, and we have this idea of time that's separate from the physical place that we're in. So how the heck did we do that? How are we able to actually construct this space for relationships to happen that is completely separate from our physical place in the world? There obviously needed to be a lot of evolution of technology in order to get us to where we can actually support relationships that are not constrained by physical space. So in order to explain some of those concepts, I'm going to use this axis to describe evolution, and it goes from Genesis. These are things that are brand new. We have no idea how to use them. They're really just ideas, and we're trying to get information. Is this relevant? Is anyone going to want to use this? Can we even teach anyone how to use this thing? And then custom, which is exactly what it sounds like, product, something that we just buy off the shelf, and commodity or utility, this is something that we don't even notice until it's not working. So you probably don't even notice your electricity until it's not working, right? You don't say like, oh, it's a really good electricity day today. You just flip on the light switch. So that's the axis for evolution that I'm going to talk about. And we'll talk about how the technology evolved in order to support these digitally enabled relationships. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a link at the bottom to learn a lot more about this way of explaining the evolution of technology ecosystems. So what we see, how these relationships are enabled, is that we were able to really push the evolution of technology-enabled transactions. And then on top of that, we're able to build relationships through technology. So the evolution of the underlying transactions and the technology that supports those transactions enables higher order innovation. So we have these new innovative business models that support relationships. What does that look like? Well, if we hop in our little Wayback Machine, what we originally see, right, kind of the dawn of this computing age that we're in right now, what we see is companies buy technology, they buy hardware, and they employ programmers, and those programmers program the hardware that the company has purchased. And then from there, we see a shift to software that people buy. So the actual hardware it evolves. You can just buy it off the shelf, and then you begin to be able to buy software off the shelf, or be able to kind of contract a company that would create software custom for you, but you don't have to buy the hardware and employ the programmers and kind of have that whole life cycle within your company. You can buy hardware and you can buy software. So we see compute evolving farther and farther towards commodity. The other way to think about this that I mentioned is how conspicuous the thing is, right? That's a good indication of evolution. So when we first see some of these hardware and software companies come onto the scene, and we're first starting to see technology-enabled business models or technology-centered business models, it's very conspicuous. How can you tell? It's in the name. So the companies that start during this period, they literally contain the word digital in the name, right? DEC, digital equipment. And they made many computers that were super popular in businesses when they're first starting to incorporate computers in their business models. They're buying those, but it's highly conspicuous. Digital is in the name because it's so conspicuous. Technology-enabled business models are not something that has ever existed before, and so people are questioning this. Do we have the skills? All of these things. So it is right there in the name. And you can tell there are lots of companies, right, that started at this era that contained those words in the name, right? So the C in CA stands for computer CSC, which isn't CSC anymore, but computer science. So it's right there in the name. If you have a bunch of companies that have the word in the name, then that probably means it's a new thing, it's a new trend. It's going to go from conspicuous to inconspicuous. And so we see the split of hardware and software, and we see the commodification of the hardware, and then that enables the software, and it enables lots of business models that are dependent on having that hardware pretty commodified and having software that is a product. Lots of examples of this. And then what happens? Why do those companies either not exist anymore or have changed their name? the C does not stand for computer anymore, and CSC doesn't even exist as CSC anymore. So what happens? Compute becomes so commodified that it's now basically just a utility. We see the cloud, right? So now you can move your services to the cloud. You only pay for the compute that you actually use. And so it becomes much more like a utility. When we think of utilities, you pay for the amount of electricity that you use, you pay for the amount of water that you use, you pay for the amount of compute that you use. And then we see companies like CA and CSC drop computer from their names because it's not conspicuous anymore, right? We want the computing part to be inconspicuous. What does a good utility look like? Well, it looks like something that you never have to think about because it never breaks. The only time you think about it is when you get the bill and you pay the bill. Does that sound familiar to anyone grappling with a high AWS bill right now? So what we see is through this evolution of compute, we see compute get pushed to commodity and through the cloud, and now we have serverless and all these different things, right? But we see compute get pushed to commodity, and now we're really able to enable transactions digitally all over for all sorts of different companies, right? There's, if we really think literally about transactions, there's no more the credit card thing, I remember as a little girl where you like smash the credit card into the little carbon copy paper. But anyway, that doesn't exist anymore. Our transactions are enabled digitally. And then what we start to see is now that we got compute on lock, right? We know how to compute. We're driving all of the variability out of compute. We're treating it as a utility. And now what do we see? We see these new ways of treating data arrive on the scene, and they're very exciting, and it's now easier we have a variety of options for storing data in whatever way is going to be most efficient based on what we want to do with the data, but we see that there's a lot of product offerings based on what we want to do with the data. So now, instead of just treating each transaction as distinct and digitally enabled, what can we do? We can start to, instead of having these anonymous transactions, we can start to ask, what do customers actually want? And are we able to enable a more customized experience through the course of that transaction? And what we see are business models that start to incorporate mass customization. So this is when you are ordering something or whatever the case may be, and you're provided with several different options, and you can customize whatever it is that you're buying at that point of the transaction. So we start to see a shift towards customization when we see that compute is pretty commodified, and then we now have a lot of tools for processing data and doing that in a way that makes sense in our business model. Then we see the shift to relationships, where the transactions are not just customized, but we have this persistent relationship across a variety of touch points. And it's a relationship with a human being, so there's lots of differentiation for that. So as we mature the compute, mature all of these data tools that we have, then we begin to enable relationships, and we enable lots of different kinds of relationships. So we can enable connections between different humans in the world. We can enable connections between a person and a business. We can enable connections between businesses, but we start to see network effects, right? Where it's a lot about, instead of driving down unit cost, driving up unit value. The network has more value when more people are engaged in it and truly engaged. So engaging in relationships that persist across lots of different touch points and transactions. So then what we start to see is not just mass customization, where you can, in a transaction, customize whatever the product is. You still, in mass customization, you get the product and it truly is a product. It's not a relationship, so you get it and hope that works out for you. With late customization, that is what we see in a relationship, where you basically get a platform and you customize it to make it the right thing for you, and that customization is persistent, and the relationship persists through that platform. And if you have gotten a new phone recently, you know what I'm talking about. So when cell phones were fresh on the scene, you'd get a cell phone, and if you jumped in the pool with it in your pocket, it's summer, right? So you jump in the pool, you forget it's in your pocket or something, your phone is busted. And then you get a new phone and you struggle like, oh, I have to copy everyone's phone number over. Like, is this person really worth it? And, you know, then we get new phone who this means. Now, what is the experience of getting a new phone? Now, you get a new phone, you log in, you know, whatever the type of phone is, right? You have the ability to log in. It usually copies most, if not all, of your contacts. You log into whatever email app and now pulls down all your emails to your phone. Most of us, when you log in, it'll ask you if you want to download all the apps that were on your old phone. So that is late customization, and that's what's enabled by these relationships. So I buy the phone. It's not really my phone until I log in and make it my phone, because it kind of just picks up right where the last phone left off, and you're able to continue relationships through the phone. So now, not a huge deal to get a new phone, because you just load up all your stuff and you're good to go. That's late customization on a platform that enables our relationships with other people, and it also enables our relationship with businesses. So now we have this beautiful ecosystem. It's all built on this bedrock of commodified compute, and then we have all of these platforms where data is in a lake, in a stream, in a snowflake, in all of these different forms, whether gas, liquid, or solid, and it's moving all around, and that is enabling these relationships between people, between companies, and between people and companies. And the world is awesome, right? Yes, of course it's awesome. You have the ability to connect with all of these different people all over the world. Your relationships are not constrained by physical space anymore. So this is a picture of me and some of my friends all meeting up in Edinburgh, where none of us actually live. And we all met through these different ways to try to map it out, all these different color-coded connections. But we all, you know, now we exist as this group of friends, and what we're doing right now, right? We're having a conference. It's completely separated from time and physical place. So I'm recording this before the conference takes place, but also be participating in the conference. The conference takes place in a virtual space where people can join from anywhere. I was asking the organizers about demographics and where people would be joining from, and the answer is pretty much anywhere. The only thing that's really constraining folks is the time that the talks will be played and the fact that they're in English, but that's pretty much it. So now we have these great things that are facilitated by these technology-based relationships, and they're separate from the nasty old constraints of physical place and the time that is associated with our place. And everything is amazing and good, right? Like all things, right? Digital transformation and these technology-enabled relationships, there are good things, there are awesome things, like me and a group of friends and us getting together today for the conference, and then there are things that are potentially a little bit scary, especially because this is something new for us as a society, and so we aren't always acting in an informed way, right? And we're not always sure of the consequences of the things, both the technology that we build and the way that we interact with that technology. So the relationships that I have just described, my relationship with my friends, many of whom I met over Twitter, our relationship that we're going to form through the course of this conference, like you'll form with other participants and speakers and organizers, those are awesome, right? What about the relationships that you are not even aware of? That can be a little bit scary. Like, probably many of you will have heard of the Facebook shadow profile. So even if you don't have a Facebook account, but you show up in a lot of pictures or people talk about you on Facebook, you could have a Facebook shadow account, right? And we have this idea of behavioral surplus, which is from Shoshana Zuboff, and in this great book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. The idea of behavioral surplus is that all of this data is being constantly collected about you, about the way that you interact in these technology-enabled ecosystems, and that starts to bleed into our physical space as well through like smart devices and things like that. And it's basically always on, right? Like if you use Gmail, Gmail could be scanning your emails to know what to market to you, or any of these things, right? Now you get warnings when you go on websites. Do you want to opt into cookies? And some of them you can opt out of if you click that you want to look at all of them every time, and some of them you can't opt out of, and some of them they say they are critical to the functioning of the service, and some of them are just for advertising. And the bottom line is you are producing tons and tons of data, and a lot of that data is being aggregated and used to make predictions about how people will engage in technology ecosystems, when they will be likely to make a purchase and what they would like to purchase. So this is something that is incredible to me, that drunk shopping is an estimated $45 billion per year industry. So we've all seen memes or jokes or social media posts about drunk Amazon purchases, and they show up and what the heck is this thing? Well, it's actually a booming industry, right? And there is data collected about this, of course, because we want to know when people are most susceptible to making a purchasing decision, what they would want to purchase. It's the same thing as when you're in the grocery store, you're physically in the grocery store and there are impulse buys right there at the checkout. Well, now through the behavioral surplus, that data that you're just always generating, that same kind of impulse buy opportunity is presented to you, but in a way that is perhaps not so conspicuous, right? You aren't able to notice it. You just kind of see the thing, oh, that looks interesting, but you didn't make the decision to go to the store, right? You didn't go with intent and say, I'm shopping right now. It's something that's much more passive, and it's just mixed in with all of this other media, right? And so these relationships are awesome, but they also are interesting in a lot of ways that could be potentially harmful, or that people don't realize that they're opting into, right? And I think another great example of this is Google search results. So I will get very different search results from someone else, from someone else, from someone else, based on where I am in the world and my search history, right? You can try searching something in signed into whatever search engine that you're using, or you could go incognito and search the same thing and end up with different search results, right? So that's even shaping the information that comes to you based on your behavior and how you interact with these technology ecosystems. So that is a relationship that you may not even be aware of. You may not realize how you're participating in that relationship, or how that relationship is influencing your actions and the information that you have available to you. So, you know, again, another lovely photo of me and some of my friends. We're all gathered at a conference and having a great time, having a delicious meal together. And what do we end up talking about? We don't all live in the same city. We live all over the world. We come here. What do we end up talking about? We end up talking about internet conspiracy theories and questionable, let's say, internet communities that have formed. And that's another potential downside. So it's wonderful that we have these technology ecosystems to enable all of us becoming friends, enable us meeting up, enable us posting this photo on social media, and our other friends can say, oh, it's great, you got to meet up. But then when we get there, we end up talking about this weirdness about these technology-enabled relationships. And one aspect of that weirdness is this. We have this huge rise of conspiracy theories. And a lot of people say, is it really that different? Or why is this happening now? Why does there seem to be this explosion of conspiracy theories? There's so many out there. Well, when relationships were constrained by physical place, you would be in your community, and someone might have an idea that, you know, chemtrails or windmills are giving us all cancer, or whatever the case may be. They might be demanding to see someone's birth certificate, or convinced that a pizza place has a basement when it doesn't, demonstrably doesn't. But the pressure of the physical community, the people gathered in the physical place that is that community, you could voice those things, but then the other people around you that you have to interact with every single day in order to get things done, in order to make a living, in order to purchase things, in order to participate in society, those folks would very likely say to you, that is ridiculous. There's no evidence of that, and you might develop like a reputation as being a little kooky or whatever the case may be. However, now, because our relationships are not constrained by that physical place, we can now get some idea, like any one of these conspiracy theories, and we can go out on the internet and find a group of people that believe the very same conspiracy theory or are apt to believe it. And then, because of behavioral surplus and because of all the customizations that are involved that we are probably not even aware of, we will begin to see more and more evidence, because the content that we will be encouraged to engage with will be customized for us. So it will be oriented around these conspiracy theories or whatever the case may be. So breaking the constraints of physical place for relationships is amazing because you can find people that believe the same things as you. It's also terrible because you can find people that believe the same things as you. So we can also break the pressure of the physical community around us telling us that what we believe may or may not be complete horsey. And we're seeing this rise of conspiracy theories in a way that appears to be unprecedented in history, and perhaps that is why, because we have now built these technology ecosystems, relationships within those ecosystems that are driven by engagement. And so that is an incentive for these platforms to provide us with content that reinforces our beliefs or gets us really engaged and excited about the things that we believe, rather than dispelling our beliefs or encouraging us to question our beliefs. There's a great book called Fantasyland. You should definitely look it up. But we currently, us as technologists, just keep in mind that we are building the technical infrastructure for Fantasyland. So if you don't love that, aren't sure you want to be participating in that, then you should be conscious of both the positive ways that your technology can be used and also the potential negative ways that this technology can be used. And I always like to think of kind of a little panel of like the 5 most extreme people I know, like the best person I know, the worst person I know, the kind of most rah person I know, the most Debbie Downer I know. So when I am looking at implementing something, I try to think from those perspectives. What's the best way that this can be used? What's the worst way that this could be used? And whatever the case may be. This exploration of these communities that are enabled by technology. This was a key thing that Hubert Dreyfus explored towards the end of his career. If you haven't heard of Hubert Dreyfus, you might be familiar with the Dreyfus model, and that was something that he and his brother worked on, the model for skill acquisition. Or you may be familiar with the body of work that now globbed together and sold as a book called What Computers Can't Do, that Hubert Dreyfus wrote those essays in that book as he was advising groups that were looking into artificial intelligence. So one of the great thinkers of our age about artificial intelligence. And Hubert Dreyfus said that the most important skill in the 21st century will be growing this ability to distinguish between a moment, a shared moment of transcendence, like you get in a spiritual setting at your church, or in other kind of live settings, right? Where we are at a baseball game, that's an example that he uses, and you have this really vivid memory of being caught up in this group, having this whooshing up is what he calls it, Hubert Dreyfus calls it, where we have a shared moment of transcendence in a group where we're all sharing a context, and we just get caught up in it, and it's this really beautiful feeling. And the flip side of that is getting caught up in a mob. So this would be like Gamergate, or some of the instances of cancel culture online. It's very difficult for people to distinguish between those in a physical place, let alone in a virtual place where there may not be some of the same friction in being caught up in either one of those, right? Because these platforms, digital transformation, driving engagement, these things can start to feel similar. So from the perspective of Hubert Dreyfus, building the ability to distinguish between whooshing up, which is a generative moment with other people where it's inclusive and generative and we all share this moment of transcendence, versus joining a mob, which again has the feeling where we're all very together, but it tends to be against something rather than for something, and it is difficult to distinguish in a technology landscape. So my question is kind of how can we build into our technologies the opportunity to distinguish between those? And it becomes even more difficult when we realize that we are in this time of rapid acceleration. And so norms are changing very quickly, our technology is changing very quickly, everything seems to be changing very quickly. It feels like this constant movement and constantly shifting expectations in a way that has not been seen before in history. And I like this kind of overview of acceleration. So there is technical acceleration. Innovations just seem to keep happening faster and faster. There's the acceleration of social change. So the norms are changing so quickly. It used to be that norms were stable for multiple generations, and now we have norms that are evolving even within a generation. So we see a lot of split with previous generations or even within a generation, and then the pace of life is increasing. So there is an expectation of multitasking. There's all of these platforms for doing things more quickly. So you can see how these all influence each other. And digital transformation is an accelerator, right? Because physically moving to a different place or physically moving items or whatever the case may be, those things take time, right? And when we remove the constraint of physical place, we are now allowing these relationships to have a very fast pace. So I don't have to write a snail mail letter anymore and send it off to someone. I email them or I DM with them. And those things can happen asynchronously all across the globe, and we're not constrained by moving a physical item between us or by bringing us together in a physical place. We now have a virtual space and a virtual time, a socially constructed time, where we can conduct our relationships. So that leads to even more of this pressure of acceleration. And if you say that I'm full of horse hooey, I challenge you to look at how much the word continuous is used in our field now. We have continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous, because it's not enough to just be fast anymore. Things are changing at this rate that feels continuous, and so we now have to come up with tools that can kind of insulate us and give us space to think. And so we now are trying to automate the continuous part of that. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's probably good for giving us space to think, but we should again ask ourselves, are we doing these things, automating these things, and removing our human ability to sense when things are going too far in one direction or when there's potentially risk, right? The danger with continuous is we end up with these crystallizations and we remove the pause points for people to reflect on their practice. So, you know, all of these tools for enabling continuous things, really good as long as we also have a corresponding point to reflect. So if these tools are presenting us with insights and we're able to sit and reflect, that's awesome. If not, it's just removing our free will, I would suppose. So I started off by saying how awesome it is to remove the constraint of physical place from relationships, be able to conduct relationships online, meet people all over the world, have the thing that I want to buy when I want to buy it, have it on my doorstep in 2 days. But then there were also downsides. So we potentially are in a very extractive paradigm where even, innocuous gestures and actions are now information is gathered about them and used to influence our actions, our moods, all of these things. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to engage in a digital transformation, enable digital relationships that are not constrained by physical space, but do that in a way that is responsible and that brings everyone along for the ride? Well, the first thing that we need to remember is that you can't make a toaster from scratch. You can, but it'll probably ignite, light on fire. If you want to learn more about someone who actually did this, you can see the toasterproject.org. But basically, this guy goes out and says he's going to make a toaster from scratch, completely from scratch. Like he's going to get iron ore and, he wants a liquefied dinosaur so he makes a plastic casing and all of these things. He tries to make a toaster completely from scratch. And basically the takeaway is that you need certain things to be commoditized before you can combine them into some higher order innovation. So just like I said at the beginning, if you're at a point in your company where transactions are still highly variable and, compute, there's a lot of variability there. Like if you're still naming each one of your servers after your favorite Star Wars character or South Park character, then you may not be in a relationship or in a position yet to enable relationships. You may need to focus on moving those things more towards the commodity, more towards the utility. And then once you have compute and transactions nailed, you can then try to create a space for digitally enabled relationships. You can create a space for digital transformation. But if you don't have the building blocks there and you're trying to make a toaster from scratch, that's just setting yourself up for failure. And, perhaps at some point later, we can have some heated discussions of cloud and managing your own data centers or whatever. So basically, if you haven't moved transactions towards utility, then you're not going to be able to combine a bunch of transactions successfully, a bunch of touch points into the makings of a relationship. Now, if you have that nailed, if you have transactions nailed and you're in this space where you have all of the building blocks for relationships, you have all of the building blocks for digital transformation, now you need to bring people along for the ride. So you have to both bring your employees and your users along for this digital transformation ride. How do you do that? I think you have to address the meaning of the transformation. So what does that mean for you in your context? What does this transformation mean, right? And I think we need to work on being transparent with meaning, right? So that people don't feel surprised in some of these situations. I'll use the Facebook influencing emotions. If you've heard of this experiment that they did, where they were trying to influence the emotions of users based on what content was presented to those users. And people felt very betrayed by this because they were brought along for the ride. They didn't know the meaning of this. It felt like manipulation. But if we are more transparent with meaning, both for our employees, hey, we're going to enable relationships in this way, and for our users, then that can help bring everyone along for the digital transformation journey. Also, skills. We need our employees and our users to have the skills to participate in a digital ecosystem, in a technology-enabled ecosystem. And I showed you a picture of my grocery store app earlier. That, I think, is such a nice example of this. So, I see my grocery store has an app, and I understand the benefits that I'll be getting from it, and I have an understanding of what data they're collecting. I get the app for the grocery store, and I'm able to do these cool things now, and that's great. But there's a lot of people who are not familiar with engaging with an app like that, especially in the community where I live, where there's lots of retired folks. And so in the grocery store, they have people with iPads who are helping users get fully signed up for the app, make sure they know how to navigate the app. And that, of course, has a big benefit for the grocery store, because then they're able to get a lot more data and not treat these transactions as distinct, but understand that they're associated with these people, and they can try to influence these people, make them more loyal to that grocery store, or whatever the case may be. So it's a great investment for them to upskill their customers and show them how to engage with this app and how to engage in this digital ecosystem, and they can then benefit from that. And then the last thing is material, the actual materials of these practices. And that's one that has become really interesting during COVID. If any of you are parents and you have your kids at home now, school is canceled in many places, so you have your kids at home, and they are being asked, many of them, to participate in online education. But this has been a huge challenge for lots of school districts, because not everyone has an actual way to access those educational materials and that curriculum, right? Many children in the United States access the internet or access computers through their local libraries, and libraries are closed right now. So you literally do not have access to the material in order to be included in those relationships, in that digital transformation of their education. And so the digital divide becomes really interesting and impactful. And now with COVID, we see this kind of exacerbated, but this has already been an issue. I challenge you to go to your favorite eatery or grocery store or whatever and say you'd like to apply for a job. Many places now, you can't get a paper application. You may get a card that has the URL for the application, or you may get sent to a computer in the back of the store. But a paper application now for a job is a liability. No one wants to keep this paper around, right? So you're directed to apply online in these settings. What if you don't have access to online? So as we're thinking about digital transformation, addressing the digital divide is a really key thing that we all need to be thinking about, and trying to decide how we can provide the people that we need to serve with the proper infrastructure to engage in a digital ecosystem. This is not just a challenge for education, but it's also, or getting a job, it's also an issue for banking and being able to participate in a financial ecosystem and that element of our societal infrastructure. So right now, there are lots and lots of people who are either unbanked or underbanked. And yet we have this movement in banking towards, again, a digital transformation where we're accessing banking through computers, through our phones, and transactions are being pushed to those form factors. So online shopping, or even in the store, you're paying with Apple Pay or whatever the case may be. This lack of access to digital infrastructure is not just important in education or getting a job. It's really important in all these different aspects of our lives, and digital infrastructure is pretty much the same as societal infrastructure now. And this is also really apparent in banking and the ability to participate in a financial ecosystem. So right now we have tons of people that are unbanked or underbanked, and at the same time we have a push towards digital transformation in banking. So we have more and more transactions moving towards digital ecosystems or being digitally enabled, actual financial transactions. So we shop online, we use our phones to pay for things, we use Apple Pay or whatever the case may be. Even in a physical store, we do those things. I travel a lot, or I did before COVID, and now in more and more cities, you can just tap your phone instead of getting whatever the local transportation, public transportation card is. So we have the shift towards digital transformation for banking, and what does that actually mean? This is one that I find so interesting to explore, because for many people, when we hear digital transformation, we think about smartphone apps or tablet apps. Everything's got to be an app, or it has to be on your phone. But I really want us to challenge that and think of who has access to that actual material that's needed for that practice. Not everything needs to be on a smartphone. We have these technology-enabled, relationship-based business models, but that we get in our heads, especially in the global north and in the Western world, need to be enacted on a smartphone. But for this definition of digital transformation, it doesn't say smartphone anywhere. So the things that I find really interesting are like M-Pesa, which is how a lot of banking and transactions are done in many countries that actually a lot of people in the global north are not aware of. And that's where those transactions are done through a dumb phone. So you don't need a smartphone. You're doing everything through text messages, and you're doing things at the kiosk or shop for your cell phone provider. And so I think as we look at what it takes to participate in a relationship in a digital ecosystem, we need to ask, do people have access to the skills? Do they have access to the material that it takes to participate in this ecosystem? And not falsely constraining what we believe it takes to participate in those relationships. So just because you have a smartphone doesn't mean everyone has a smartphone. Just because we have access to the internet at home, and probably if you're participating in this conference, you do. Keep in mind there's a huge digital divide out there, and we need to be conscious of that as we engage in digital transformation. So I think if we really want to be disruptive, and if we want to be one of these companies that weathers this storm, and we're able to totally digitally transform, I think that we need to look for the answers at the margins. So we need to be looking for people that are currently underserved by the current offerings, and say, what would it take for those folks to be served? In what kind of ecosystem could they actually have their needs met? And that's how we can avoid disruption, right? So the example that I just gave about folks with dumb phones engaging in kind of a smart ecosystem, in that situation, that was an observed behavior of people who were underserved by the current banking ecosystem. And a couple companies observed how people were exchanging air minutes as almost a type of currency. And instead of saying, how can we get those people to participate in this existing banking ecosystem, they said, how can we make this ecosystem big enough to incorporate that existing behavior? So if we want to be the disruptors rather than be disrupted, then we need to go find people that are underserved by the current ecosystem, the current paradigm, and ask them what it would take for them to get their needs met, or ask them how they are meeting their needs currently. And then instead of trying to pull those folks into the existing ecosystem, we try to make the existing ecosystem bigger and make it work for them. And I think we've all gotten a taste of this over the past couple months, right? Many of us, I think, were probably working in a company or an ecosystem where things were not remote first, right? You are the remote employees would not always be able to participate fully in whatever things we were doing. I just keep hearing so many people saying this, right? And now we've been put in the situation where we're forced to get good at remote, right? And everything needs to be remote first. And I think that is really interesting because it's not the most successful things that I have seen are not asking how do we take this thing that is associated with physical place and us all being co-located, but how do we make a great thing that is remote first? So instead of just trying to adapt the thing that was to the new paradigm, we say, how can we take advantage of this new paradigm? And I am really excited about the conferences and events that have been happening now because they are open to a lot of people who couldn't have gotten the budget before, right, to travel to a physical event, where everyone is co-located. So I'm wondering now, is the exchange of ideas going to be accelerated a lot? Are we going to see much higher rates of exchange of ideas because now other people who couldn't get the travel budget or couldn't get away from home, they have caretaking duties, they're able to participate in these conferences, which are a great exchange of ideas. And so I think if we can take on that benefit and what are the advantages of digital rather than just trying to take the physical and move it digital, but also do that in a way that is responsible to our users and transparent to our users. So I think digital transformation is this great opportunity for us to question if we can create a paradigm that is generative rather than extractive. So how can we make things more plentiful, involve more people by breaking down some of these barriers to participation rather than just trying to extract as much as we can from what is already there. So that's my talk about digital transformation, and you all should feel free to hit me up anytime. I'm Kat Swatell pretty much everywhere. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever you like to conduct your digitally enabled relationships. And I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation. Thank you.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
All righty. It's now time for our news section. Again, just a couple headlines around the sites. Please go visit the sites to get more, though. On DevOps.com, I wanted to highlight two articles. One is 5 areas to consider when building an open source stack. And I know most of us these days are building or developing and deploying on open source stacks. It's a good article with 5 areas to consider from Justin Rourke. Check it out. Also, I wanted to call your attention to another one. This one is from Andrew Fuqua, and it's data and tools don't solve problems, people do. There's a lesson there. I mean, this is something I've seen and learned the hard way over the years. So do check that one out. And then lastly, I just want to call your attention. Robob. Our Robob cartoons have been just amazing lately. And I highly, highly recommend you check those out. All right. That's it for DevOps.com. Let's now jump over quickly to Security Boulevard. And on Security Boulevard, we have, let's see, from Jonathan Andreessen, we have Smart Edge is a key enabler for a modern remote workforce. We have Debunking Cybersecurity Jargon, Part 4. What is optical character recognition? And Cybersecurity Lessons from the Pandemic, Data, Part 2. Also it's over in CISO Suite. That's a really good article. Check it out. So that's what I have for you today on Security Boulevard. And now over on Container Journal, we have Profici brings MDM to containers running on Azure. And article from our friends about JFrog. JFrog makes free repository available for Helm charts. You know, Helm is really catching on and becoming a very popular open source movement or, project, and a lot of users. Anyway, check that out. JFrog's now has a Helm repository for you. As I always say, that is not an exhaustive news. Go check out our website. Stay on top of what's going on in your world. But for now, we're going to hand things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, who has a great video as well as a preview of this week's webinars on store. Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Brian Brozek. Is that right? Brozek?
You got it. Good job.
I got it. Yay. Okay. He's the CISO at a company called Optiv Security. Brian, thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about Optiv Security, first of all.
Sure. Optiv is a leading security solutions integrator. So we take security technology and security consulting and package that all up for you to solve all of our clients' security needs. It's a never-ending task.
Yeah, sounds like, security obviously is top of mind for a lot of folks these days. And whether we're talking about, application development security, DevSecOps, or whether talking about straight up IT security or mobile security or security in this time of pandemic, a lot of folks are having conversations and especially around the idea of IT security during these, these strange times that we're living in. So, and ransomware obviously is part of that conversation. So I'm interested in hearing from you where you see kind of ransomware kind of moving, maybe now in these, pandemic times, folks working from home and possibly in the future.
Sure. Yeah. Ransomware has been with us for quite a while. But it has continually evolved over the last few years. Before, it would decrypt or encrypt all of your data, and then you would have to, pay a ransom to get the decryption. Now what we're seeing is ransomware is almost like a smokescreen for attackers to then get into your network and steal data. And so you're almost held for ransom twice. Get the decryption key to get your data back, and then pay another ransom so they don't sell your information or post your information online. So that's been a little troubling in terms of the trends. The other thing that I'm seeing is the target base. So before, they would go after the targets you would expect, financial institutions or big technology companies. But now they're targeting healthcare industries like universities. Even here in my home state of Texas, the Texas state court system was hit with a ransomware attack. And you may be thinking, what kind of intellectual property do those companies have? Well, what they're doing is they're selling your data back to you by holding it for ransom. So their target base is greatly expanded. So that's been a big trend that I'm seeing. And if you want to look ahead, if you want to look ahead a little bit, it's going to be things like critical infrastructure. That's what really scares me.
Yeah, the going back to the stealing the personal data. I've been hearing a couple of reports of organizations that are actually, because of this, are become out of compliance with CCPA and GDPR regulations because their data has, if they don't pay the ransom and their data is exposed, then they have, they've essentially been out of compliance with these regulatory privacy regulations, I guess. I don't even know what to call them, but something exactly. you don't want to run afoul of. So it's kind of a double whammy for some of these organizations.
Well, it is, because you have to pay the ransom to get your data back. And if you don't pay the ransom, you're rebuilding systems, loading data from backup, which is going to take a long time. Mm-hmm. Then you get hit, like you said, then you get hit with all the fines from, the California, Privacy Act and others. And then, of course, you have the brand reputation of being hit by that. And then there's a hidden third issue of, if you don't close all the holes in the way that the attackers got into your environment, they're going to come back and hit you with a second ransomware.
It's frightening to think about, but it's even more frightening to think about the fact that they could actually move into critical infrastructure and compromise the networks that way. So, is that something that's happening now, or is that something that's kind of more of a quote unquote on the horizon type threat?
So we are just starting to see that trend begin. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Association, CISA, they recently published an alert earlier this year about a gas processing company that their operational technology environment was hit with a ransomware. There's a new version of ransomware called ENAX, which is just snake spelled backwards. I don't know why these attackers do that type of thing. But that's one of the very first types of ransomware that actually targets this operational technology environment directly. So we're starting to see that happen now. And again, that's a real troubling trend when you think about how old some of the technology is in these, oil, gas, electric companies, as well as they weren't designed to be connected to the internet and protect against all these types of attacks.
Right, but because of COVID-19 and the fact that so many folks have to work from home, they're under their stay-at-home orders. Operational technologies are increasingly being connected to the internet because it's often the only way that these companies can actually be able to, enable their employees to work from home. But do you think that's, do you think that's kind of something that's going to be the new normal for organizations? Especially as a lot of people are predicting that either there's going to be a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, or there will be other pandemics following this, and this will just kind of be the way of life for a lot of people moving forward. So, do you think that this is definitely going to be an issue? And what can organizations do for for their operational technologies to lock them down, if you will, but still offer that level of availability that their employees are going to need if they are working from home?
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be the trend that we're seeing. I've seen estimates ranging upwards of $20 billion industry in terms of ransomware as you start looking ahead into 2021. So this doesn't see any signs of it slowing down. And I think the key thing when it comes to ransomware, and this is something we just recently did at my company a couple months ago, is you run ransomware simulations. And so you actually put your team through a simulated ransomware attack so that you can test your incident response process and work through all those issues that are going to come up in a, sort of a controlled practice environment rather than waiting for the real thing and then realize you don't have the right tools in place or the right skill sets on hand.
So what about other ransomware attacks that you guys are seeing? Are there things that maybe, I don't know, the average consumer might be maybe more of a target for, or something that at least they need to be more aware of?
Mm-hmm. So there are some ransomware variants out there that will target cell phones to try to hold your pictures and some of your other personal information hostage. Another trend that I expect to grow is around deepfake videos. So I don't know if you've seen much of the news there about how you can put somebody's face on somebody else's body and mimic their speech patterns and words. With artificial intelligence and the other advancements in video technology, I think this could become a form of ransomware where I'm going to ask you for money, or I'll release this video showing you saying, hateful things to the internet. How do you stop that?
Right.
That's a real troubling trend. So I see that as something that hackers are going to use to either hold companies or people hostage, or use it as a way to, almost like activism, to get companies in trouble.
Yeah, deepfakes I know are being used increasingly on social media networks to influence, elections and the just public perception of events and personalities. So, I can certainly see where that would be another vector for cyber criminals and hackers to get at the general public, if you will. I hate to think about the fact that there are even more ransomware, possibilities out there. But, what about medical devices?
Yeah, that's another area where, again, with this trend towards making things, wireless, Bluetooth enabled, you're starting to see that where things like insulin pumps, where they can talk wirelessly to other medical devices to check your blood sugar and things like that. I mean, last year there were reports of hundreds of different variants that were open to attack. Boy, what a scary thought of not only getting a lethal dose of insulin, but again, what if they're holding that person hostage, saying, "Hey, if you don't pay me, 100 Bitcoin within the next 8 hours, we're going to give you a shot of insulin." Now, today, you can just remove the pump. But what happens when they start getting implanted, right, actually within your body, and you don't have the option to remove it? That gets a little scarier. And folks like you and I, we think, well, who would think to do something like that? Well, criminals. They got a different mindset than we do. So that's a very scary thought.
Yeah, it's and it's not unprecedented, because I have heard of instances where they have been able to successfully hack into pacemakers and and do harm to other people. So it's a frightening thing to think about. And I can only hope that artificial intelligence and other security next generation security technologies are put in place and quickly to help mitigate some of these ransomware attacks and threats to people and property. Especially since they always say that the government say don't pay the ransom, because that's we don't negotiate with hackers and cyber criminals. So it's a very, very difficult situation, I imagine, and it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. So do you have any best practices or advice for folks when you're dealing with ransomware incidents?
So all the usual foundational cybersecurity recommendations, you should follow. But I think the big thing is practice. I like to use the analogy of, basketball. So basketball players will shoot hundreds of free throws in a week for practice, and a free throw is worth 1 point. Mm-hmm. But yet companies may test their incident response procedures once a year. And even then, they may just kind of do like a tabletop where they just kind of read through their procedures. So you would think companies would spend more effort practicing for such a potential high impact event than what they currently do today. So if anything, practice, and get people used to dealing in that very stressful, very high pressure situation when it comes to responding to incidents.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you so much for kind of, I guess, bumming me out about the thought of ransomware. But it's a very important topic, and I know we really do need to discuss it. So thanks so much for your time and your expertise. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. And again, thank you for publishing all these wonderful educational videos. It's really a great way when we're all stuck at home to grow our skills and learn new things. So you're doing a great service for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
All right, everybody, please stay tuned. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps. Today is Tuesday, July 7th, and here are some of the webinars that we have coming up for the rest of this week on DevOps.com. As always, we have a huge inventory of webinars, both upcoming and on demand, that are totally worth checking out. But these are coming up today, tomorrow, and Thursday, so I thought I'd let you know about them so you can make plans accordingly. The first one is happening today at 3 p.m. on DevOps.com, as I said. It's called Kubernetes, Reducing Infrastructure Costs and Complexity, and it is for any organization that is using containers and Kubernetes in their environments. Really looking at the challenges of keeping Kubernetes workloads highly available while keeping their costs low. So I know that's an issue that a lot of organizations are dealing with right now, especially as they move deeper into containers and Kubernetes. This one is sponsored by Spot, and again, lots of good information, totally worth checking out. The second one is happening tomorrow on DevOps.com at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's called Revolutionize Software Test Automation with AI. Aaron Bakar, who is with Micro Focus, he was one of the panelists on my AI Ops/ML Ops webinar that I held June 29th, and it was a great conversation, panel discussion, and he gave us a bit of a preview during that panel discussion of this webinar that I'm telling you about now, that's happening tomorrow at 1 p.m. as I said. This one focuses on how organizations can increase their speed and reliability of their continuous delivery environments using machine learning. lots and lots of really, really great information. Erin's got a lot to say, a lot of really good information. And if you are looking for ways to increase your continuous delivery pipeline with speed and improving the reliability, please give this one a look, because it's got some great information for you. Our third webinar today is happening on Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, as I said. It features Unravel's Chief Data Officer and Vice President of Engineering, Sandeep Uttamchandani, I believe it's called. I think I got that. And Matteo Pilati, who is the Executive Director and Head of Technology Data Platform at DBS Bank. They're going to be discussing how DBS Banks, how they're working their big data strategy, some of their lessons learned, and how Unravel's technology has played a very large role in the bank's big data efforts. It's one for anybody who is now grappling with issues surrounding big data. Need to get that information, need to get the actionable intelligence within that information, and this is one way that that organizations can draw upon the experiences of another organization to possibly get their issues resolved. That's it for today as far as webinars are concerned. Check back on Thursday. I'll have another pile of webinars that I'll be telling you about. Until then, please stay safe.
Thanks, Charlene. Great stuff there with Brian. Up next is our Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley has some great commentary today. Let's head over now and listen in on Mitchell Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitch, take it away.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. Today I'm going to take a little bit of a turn, a little bit of a different topic than I normally do on Analyst Corner. With the whole stay-at-home orders and all the impact of COVID-19, et cetera, and that's because of the human tragedy part of it. But there's certainly been a big impact on our lives, and the work of stay-home orders, work from home, et cetera, has created, at least for me, some time, maybe some space and quiet to do some exploration. We all have different things that we have, topics, areas of focus, interests that we do as our hobbies or whatever. And AI has been something, while I don't spend a great deal of time working with it, it has kind of reemerged as a topic I've been doing some more exploration in. Now, AI is not a focus of Accelerated Strategies. And that's why I say we're kind of taking a little bit of a different turn here on Analyst Corner. But AI is something that's entered into my career at different points in time. Of course, you can't be in tech without hearing AI or machine learning referenced in everybody's product. I think it's in every product. You buy a banana in the store, it's got AI in it. Practically, it's most used that cavalierly, it seems like. Maybe I'm taking that a little far, but I'm not sure too far. It's just very prevalent. And I always ask myself, okay, is that really AI? Is it really machine learning? What are you doing there? Is it just some interesting data processing, data mining, other things? Algorithms, you talk about AI in characters and games and all kinds of things. I just ask myself that. And it's usually with my inside voice, because oftentimes I expect the person I'm talking to probably doesn't know either. Now, let me first say, though, before we go too far into this, is I am no expert in AI. I don't claim to be. It's not my field of study. It just happens to be kind of a side interest that I have done a little bit of work in, and of course, enters and re-enters into different points in time, as I mentioned, in my career. But most of what I learned happened in really the late 80s, early 90s. And this is a time where neural networks was kind of the focus of AI, the neural network simulating logic and reasoning that the brain would do on a certain topic or domain. A lot of interest in things around forward chaining, reverse chaining engines. Expert systems was another term we used a lot. For myself, I did a little bit of work in expert systems. I did quite a bit of work with Prolog as a programming language and a little bit with Lisp over a period of about 4 years or so. And that caused me, of course, as I was getting into it, I need to learn some stuff about this. So doing some research into the background of AI and its origins. And there are lots of people who, were founders, pioneers, whatever term you want to use, in the field early on and since. And you're going all the way back to Alan Turing. And one of the interesting kind of characters I think I would also call a hero of AI was Marvin Minsky. Now, he just passed away in 2016, so it wasn't that long ago. Really fascinating guy. And there's some things about him I've really found interesting. He was an American cognitive scientist, a researcher in artificial intelligence. He was also co-founder of MIT's AI laboratory, many other things. I don't have time to list them all here. He was a mathematician, a computer engineer. It's kind of a renaissance person of AI, if you want to think of him that way. I think of him as like the Carl Sagan of AI, if that reference makes any sense to you from a Cosmos perspective. And he described the early days of AI, really, and of computing too, both software and hardware, where they had innovations, they had discoveries, they created new things every day. It was such a wide open field, It was there hadn't been a lot of work done. It had been some, but so much more to go, so many more things to create and learn. But he described, they were creating new inventions every week, sometimes every day, and Minsky had some real kind of seminal milestone works in his career. A couple of them were some things that he published. One of them is called Perceptrons, which is about computational geometry, which is also known for some controversy. Some people feel that sort of directed some work away from neural networks because he identified some issues around that kind of path in AI. Which is interesting, but it's also come in very much so. But a lot of that work was around symbolic approach or symbolic expressions, and which led to symbolic computing, things like less computing languages that were symbolic languages. As I mentioned, most of my work, I did a little bit of Lisp work, was also with Prolog, which is something that was based on logic or mathematics, if you took that in high school and college, but another forward chaining engine technology. Minsky also had another publication, a book. It's called Society of Mind. And he was fascinated, of course, about human intelligence and how that might be represented, that thinking machine approach to AI in software form. How is intelligence represented? How is the mind structured and think, and how might you take those concepts and apply it in a kind of software setting? Easy problem to solve, right? No, it's not. But he thought of intelligence as more than one system, but it was something that was comprised of numerous small components. Here's a tie-in to today, by the way, something he referred to as agents. Now, it's interesting, all these small agents, it's simple purpose, single purpose, small components. These agents are part of this larger system that make up this intelligent thinking machine. Now, of course, that's an interesting connection to our world today of containers and microservices. Everything's getting smaller, broken down into smaller and smaller bits. Sort of put back together in service mesh. And well, I'm not saying that's an AI system, but it's interesting some of the parallels to how he thought about the problem and our cloud native architectures of today. Now, speaking of today, a lot of the focus, much of it, what we hear about it, maybe most of it, what we hear about is around machine learning, which really grew out of AI. At a different point in my career, not too long ago, a few years back, I had some brief exposure to Dr. Bernardo Huberman, not to name drop here. It just happened to be someone that he came to lead an organization at a company I was with, a research firm called Cable Labs. And I also was part of a subsidiary called Curio that I ran at the time. And he and I had a chance to have some conversations with him. He's just a super fascinating guy too. I mean, I couldn't even begin to list all of his accolades and accomplishments. I mean, PhD in physics. He was at Xerox PARC. He was an HP senior fellow, Stanford professor, leads in the next gen team at Cable Labs. Again, lots of stuff. I'm sure I'm not doing him nearly the justice that should be done to someone with that much accomplishment in this field. But it was really interesting when I sat down with him and said, so tell me machine learning, why is it something that's taken off and is so popular so suddenly, really, and just kind of seems like the last 10 years. I know it's been a field of study for much longer than that. And Dr. Huberman described it as really just one narrow slice, a sliver of all of AI that's got a lot of attention, really a lot of advancement beginning in the 90s, especially the late 90s. Now, as I went back, and these are my squirrel moments at this time with work at home and kind of looking back into this and like, oh yeah, I remember Marvin Minsky and the book and the points in time when I was working about this. And now we're talking about AI and machine learning. So I did a little bit of looking into this some more, and kind of one of the standard definitions for machine learning is computer algorithms that improve automatically through experience. Well, guess what that experience is? Yes, it's algorithms, but that experience is data. And the world that we live in today, and this is Dr. Huberman explained to me, that because machine algorithms, their machine learning algorithms are really based around data for their learning, but you have to have large, vast amounts of data for those algorithms to really, truly learn. And that's the secret. That's sort of where the secret sauce, the ingredients come together to make machine learning. In our world today, because of the internet, because of cheap storage, because of cloud, because of how we design and build applications, and the fact that we can keep so much data around for so long, and we use everything from logs to information about customer behavior and all the fascinating ways that we get benefits from that now. Machine learning is one of the disciplines that's really emerged because of all that data, that proliferation of data. So machine algorithms take advantage of really large data sets. And one approach is to label that data or the logic that's used in those algorithms as a result of that data as valid. This is right, this is wrong. And in essence, if you do that on a massive scale, you have enough that you now have some learning about using that data about what is right and what is wrong. Now, in machine learning, there's different kind of types and disciplines. The three of the most popular that I'm aware of are supervised learning, which you give a set of inputs and a set of desired outputs to algorithms. And from that, they develop a general rule that maps those two together. So it's kind of, you can imagine a real simplistic version of, here's a list of things on the left, here's a list of things on the right, draw the line between the words that correlate with each other. We'll take that on a very large scale, and that's probably a gross simplification of what machine learning does for supervised learning. That's kind of what happens effectively. That's how it makes sense in my head. And then there's unsupervised learning, which is sort of the opposite. Algorithms that find their own structures in data, find hidden patterns in these vast amounts of data. Here's a large set of data. What's there? What can you find? What can you uncover in that data? And then there's something called reinforced learning, which are the kind of algorithms you might see in like a driving autonomous vehicle application or in a game. Something that there are reinforcements, this idea of a valid answer. Effectively, the reinforcement is a reward when you get the desired results. Something like identifying that's a person entering into the road, where there are a lot of rewards that led up to determining that led the AI machine learning algorithms to that path based on the data that's receiving. Now, there's also machine learning. There's also deep learning, or deep structured learning, which kind of brings back in, I guess, some of the neural network concepts that I was referencing earlier, something they call convolutional neural networks. I think one of the most common uses of this is something like an image recognition or computer vision type situation, where deep learning takes an interesting approach. It essentially learns at different levels, kind of at a macro level. Takes a set of data, for example, a matrix of pixels in an image, and really transforms that layer upon layer upon layer. So, for example, the first layer may be just recognizing here's a matrix of pixels. and maybe a few ideas of what might be rough edges that are encoded in that picture. The next set of pixels, the next layer is starting to refine or find some more of those edges. Next layer is continuing to find that, putting some things together, identifying eventually that those layers come together and actually make some features or some shapes, some structures, like a human face or stripes in the middle of the road or curves along the side of a road or a ball rolling across the street, something like that, whether it be in video or just in an image capture. That's what machine learning, right, some deep learning is about in sort of the machine learning discipline. So, I happened to have a chance to ride in one of the autonomous vehicle services with Lyft when I was in Las Vegas. I guess it was right before COVID happened. It was during RSA, February of this year, 2020. It was really interesting because you could hear the computer's fans whirring in the back trunk and watching what was happening, at least through the display that was provided, which I'm sure was just a small part of, tiny fractional part of what was really happening and all of that. You think about the level and the amount of algorithms, computation that's happening, and these kind of algorithms that are being used. So kind of bringing it all back today, as you think about, come across areas that you might have an interest in, maybe it's AI and machine learning, and maybe it's something else. I hope you'll take advantage of the time that we have, some of that space, some of that quiet, maybe pursue that, have some squirrel moments, explore it. It's been really fascinating for me to go back and relook, kind of revisit some of the learnings that I've had and learn some more things about, deep learning was something I hadn't really known a lot about until I did some investigation here recently, coming up to speed on it and thinking about, okay, now how does that apply to digital transformation and how we might create strategies around taking some of the concepts or some of the data that we've captured around customer behaviors and things that are changing and looking for patterns that might be new structures that might be in the data using an unsupervised machine learning algorithm, things like that. So you never know how that might come back to apply to your work. Maybe it's just an interesting side topic to engage in to keep your mind fresh and active. So I hope you'll take some time to do that. And I appreciate you being with me on this journey, some of it looking back and also looking forward into AI and machine learning and how that ties into our software world and ultimately our digital transformation world that we're creating every day. I wish you the best.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay, I think that's going to wrap up our show for today, Tuesday, July 7th. Hope you hung in there through all of it. It was a lot of good content today. We'll be back on Thursday with a fresh show. Looking forward to seeing you there. Until then, everyone, be safe, be well, be strong. TechStrong. This is Alan, and we're out.